Okay.
Before you start, why are you looking so smart today?
Thank you. I'm heading to the Forbes CMO Summit in Europe. It's going to be the first summit they do outside of the US, so I'm very excited to meet a lot of Europe's leading CMOs this afternoon.
Very good.
Mm-hmm.
Very good.
Thank you for that. Today we're going to talk about Facebook. Mm-hmm. Our suggestion is that its business may have peaked, which is a big, bold statement, isn't it?
It is a bold statement, but it is a big business
Yeah.
at the moment. Let's just have a look at some of their figures. So their revenue figures are now nearly $28 billion,
Yeah.
up 54% from last year.
Yeah, which is amazing. 50% growth from last year.
And their user base, their unique user base, is also up 60%.
Yeah.
They've now hit 2 billion
Yeah.
monthly unique users.
Yeah,
It's
so it's
massive.
interesting how far they're going to go. How big can you get?
Well, this is it. I mean, have they hit saturation?
Maybe.
We're never quite sure.
Mm-hmm.
But we've talked about Facebook being a safe sanctuary for advertisers in the
Yeah.
past, but the reality is that they're actually a safe sanctuary for the investor community. If you look over the last 2 years, their share price and how it's increased, it's astonishing.
Yeah. So I think the share price has doubled in the last 2 years. And you know, it's like a sport, I think, to write off Facebook. We've been involved in that ourselves. I think a year ago we wondered whether it was the beginning of the end for Facebook, and maybe we're about to say the same thing again. But you know, they've had, the stars have been aligned for them. They've been a safe harbour for marketers. They have brilliantly enabled a trackable kind of single login, not just across Facebook properties, across devices, but also increasingly into other environments, particularly in gaming environments. You know, people using their Facebook login to kind of use apps and things like that. Very, very powerful marketing proposition and amazing tools, segmentation tools, which we've talked about before.
That's right.
But maybe in the last 12 months they've had a bit of a number of challenges, some of which are well documented, and there might be some dark clouds maybe gathering on the horizon that Facebook maybe should be concerned about.
Yeah.
So we're going to think about a few of those. The first one is their metrics. Well documented errors in the last 12 months. I forget now, we've lost count how many there were now. I think about a dozen metrics issues where they have overstated either the delivery of of advertiser campaigns, so the amounts of views or the duration of views of videos and things like that, and also, as we talked about a couple of months ago, you know, overstating the reach of Facebook. You know, they're claiming there are more accounts in certain demographics than actually people that exist in a lot of countries in the world.
And linked to that is accountability, right? So Mark Pritchard, made a massive issue on and challenging Google and Facebook to allow independent third-party verification companies to go in and monitor the numbers that they pump out.
The third thing, which has been got a lot of attention recently, is this whole fake news, and particularly kind of foreign interference in political campaigning. What's emerged is that Facebook was being used to potentially manipulate political kind of sentiment and maybe even influence voters, and that comes down to one of Facebook's great assets, which is its ability to target and identify users based on their political persuasions, and you can then hyper-target messages to influence those people, which seems to have been abused in the last kind of US election.
The fourth area is censorship. So they have a very confused policy around censorship. Certain pieces of content are heavily restricted. Other pieces of content seem to be far more available and far more inflexible in the way that they kind of allow to pump it out. So that sense of confusion, I think, is damaging them as a brand if they are a media company. Yeah,
exactly. But this is the pivotal thing, right? I mean, their value is based on them being one of the world's giant advertising companies. But yet they keep saying that they're a technology company, not a media company, because we assume that by declaring they're a media company, then they have to take editorial control, which is a huge cost for them, and that's a huge responsibility. Whilst claiming you're a tech company, you can say it's a technology that connects people and it's to do with free speech. But the fact that they have some slightly peculiar filters of what they think is acceptable and not, and they employ armies of editors that are evaluating content, they're kind of sitting on the fence on that one. And that leads us, I suppose, to the fifth point, which is that Facebook have been called the world's most sophisticated surveillance operation. So if you use Facebook, you have a sense of how much actual information you give up as a user. And Facebook's business model is predicated on this idea that they can analyze user data, turn that into product for advertisers to highly target in a really highly effective way. And that makes up 98% of their revenue is, or more, I think it's nearly 99%, but I mean it's nearly 100%, right? Is advertising revenue. That is their sole purpose, Facebook, is to monetize their users' data.
And that unique,
and that's what they do.
That's right, and that unique quality and ability to measure that data means that their business is valued at $500 billion.
Yeah.
It's not just the advertising revenues, but it's the valuation of that as a rich data company.
Yeah, and the fact that the share price keeps growing suggests that the markets believe that this is just going to continue growing in one way or another.
That's right.
Okay, so a critical time. Has Facebook peaked? That's a really good question. So it's probably going to come down to a few important decisions they need to make. The first of which we just discussed, is they're going to be under increasing pressure to declare whether they're a media company or not, we think, and then take the responsibility that goes along with being that media company.
Yeah. The second point is, have they reached saturation? They've got 2 billion unique users, but they need more. Right, in order to monetize this.
Where do you get them from?
Where do you get them from? You send out drones to far-reaching places in the world that don't have the internet, and see whether you can provide it for them that way.
Exactly. So they're apparently trying to do deals with some countries where they provide internet, sometimes carried by drones circling the planet, in exchange for a kind of curated Facebook experience being delivered on the ground in the Amazon. So there we go. The third thing, the third challenge is related to that, is minimizing the churn, or attracting kind of new younger generation as well, which, of course, they're under threat, Facebook, because they've lost a lot of younger users, particularly to Snapchat, which is the kind of the most well known. Snapchat, incidentally, may be being purchased by Chinese investors. Musical.ly, another really famous kind of like teen age app, has been bought, we think, by a Chinese investment company. There's going to be massive investment potentially in this kind of younger stage. That's going to be a critical challenge for Facebook to try and overcome that.
The fourth one is Amazon.
Yes.
So we've covered Amazon in a past episode, but they've only just begun to start looking at monetizing their database. And when they activate that properly, that should terrify Facebook. Yeah,
it will do, because Facebook's, as we've discussed, Amazon's ad revenue is going to be a very tiny part of their business, but they're going to be very well resourced. Facebook, as we've just said, 98% is ad revenue. They are an ad revenue business, and there's only a finite amount of ad dollars there. So it's about fighting for share, and you'd imagine that can only go down. And the final thing is data regulation, I think. In Europe, we're welcoming GDPR in May in 2018. That's going to have an impact on businesses like this, which trade data, which monetize data. So Facebook will be organizing themselves not only around regulation, but also around, I think, change in sentiment of users. People are going to become far more aware of what data or the value of the data they have, and how they trade that with companies like Facebook. So it's going to come. Pressure is going to come not just from regulators, but also, I think, from users as well. Okay, good week 4.
Alibaba.
Yes.
And Singles Day last Saturday. In one day, they amassed $25 billion worth of sales. 40% up from last year.
Yeah.
And as we've just talked about, it's almost the equivalent of Facebook's entire annual revenue in just one day.
Amazing.
Amazing. And it was a bad week for?
Well, it's a bad week if you have been planning or hoping to be able to cut your Cannes budget this year. So the owners of Cannes announced how they were deciding to kind of trim Cannes, because last year, this year, it was accused of just being kind of overindulgent and too expensive, and it had gone out of control. So the owners went away, had to think about what they were going to do, and they've announced their plans. And where all of us were expecting somewhat of a haircut. It's a very, very tight little trim just on one side. So they've managed to reduce their own costs, I think, by cutting the festival from 8 days to 5 days. Right. But yet, broadly, the cost for agencies entering and attending is going to be about the same. They've managed to cut 3 categories but add 4 new ones. And they've fixed what are the already sky high prices. So you will be guaranteed to be able to have lunch for a minimum of 50 euros.
Well, they're trying.
Yeah, okay, in the right direction. Okay, an easy question of the week. Has Facebook peaked?
Yes, no, whatever.
Please vote up here. That's your media snack for this week. Thank you very much for watching.
See you next week.
Let's
do it again. Okay, go.
Okay.
Before you start, why are you looking so smart?